The story begins with the girl's family finding her only to sacrifice her. The daughter is only needed as prey for the goddess. They never loved her and only used her for their own purposes. And the worst part is that the girl didn't even know about it. She trusted her parents and was sure that they never wished her any harm. At one point, the girl hears some unusual and unfamiliar voice that asks who she is. Bella opened her eyes and saw before her a huge creature 10 times larger than herself. But before saying her name, first of all, the girl asked him to introduce himself, and it turns out the creature's name is Dino. For a moment, Bella realized that she was floating in the air and appeared to be in some other world. She looks at him and doesn't understand what's going to happen next, or what she's even doing here. It's not like this dragon wants to hurt her. He would have done it a long time ago. He begins to warn that very soon, Bella will cease to exist, and the scary voice makes those words seem even scarier than they really are. Dino said he would turn back the clock to the point where her body was intact. Bella never understood the gist of a single word. In any case, she only had to watch what was happening and not fight back. The dragon warned that after a few seconds he would send her back in time, but that wasn't all. He hinted at some power she would get as a bonus. It turns out he's only helping her because he also wants revenge on someone. In the same second, Bella finds herself in a different place. She sees her hand in front of her and wonders why she even raised it at that moment. The girl realized that something had happened, and also that this conversation with the dragon was not a dream. Something like time teleportation had happened. She began to look over her body and realize what had happened after all. Only one thing was obvious. She had some kind of mission to accomplish. Bella looked around for any clues, for when talking to the dragon, there were no specifics or explanations to be found. It's only after a while that the girl realizes this is the same house she lived in before moving to the palace. First thing she did was try to find a calendar and find out today's date, and on it she saw that it was February. At that moment, everything became clear to her. The thing was that when the girl was almost destroyed by her relatives, the dragon she had just talked to had prevented that from happening, saved her, and brought her back to the past. As suddenly, a very familiar voice sounded. But since there was no one in the room, Bella started looking around, because she didn't realize what it was. It turns out a little dragon started talking to her. He said it was him and asked her to come closer, but he seems to be uncomfortable with something. He didn't expect to turn into such a small creature, unlike what he was before. Dino is used to feeling much bigger, stronger, and more powerful, but now he is instead like a very cute little creature. He reminded them that they had no time to waste, so they needed to spring into action to avenge their common enemy. And that wasn't all. The dinosaur felt that her power wasn't enough, so it would take them much longer than he had bargained for. The girl asked how he realized that her magical abilities weren't enough, to which Dino replied that if everything was normal, he wouldn't be this small right now. Anyway, there's nothing to be done about it. They'll have to use every opportunity to do their job. Surprisingly, instead of hating her relatives, the girl is afraid to do anything and doesn't know if she even wants to take revenge on anyone. She just loved her family very much, and still can't believe that she almost died because of these people. But at the same time, she's really grateful to him for the opportunity and realizes that it's something she needs to take advantage of. 3 weeks later, Bella decided that if her relatives had allowed themselves to do this to her, why couldn't she? Especially since they deserved it. She was not the first to start the conflict, so the girl has the right to do what she thinks is right, especially now that she has had the opportunity. Since the morning, she had gone to some place and promised to return before it was dark. It turns out, she needed to earn some money. The girl helped some woman to clear the snow, and in return, received a small amount of money. A woman noticed that she had an unusual animal on her shoulder, and decided to ask what its name was. But since the little dinosaur doesn't like to remember or talk about this topic, because of his small size, he immediately started to get very angry. After that, the woman decided to treat the girl with a small amount of potatoes. Bella did not refuse because extra food will never be superfluous. She thanked her and said she didn't expect to get such a bonus. Very curious as to what their future plan is, because there really isn't as much time as we'd like to have. And also, the thing is, even as a princess, her powers are much weaker than those she'll face. In addition, There are some points that will make it even harder to get back at these people. The girl was caught in time, when she was still an ordinary person, without a lot of money and opportunities. That's why she was so happy with a small bonus in the form of potatoes. But even so, she has to do something, because if she wastes time, in the future, they'll try to destroy her again. It seems that the situation is too complicated, because who would want to fight with those who are many times stronger and more cunning? But for the sake of life and a happy future, Bella is ready for anything. She knows only one thing. She doesn't plan to die a second time. This time her relatives will have to die because they started it and they will regret it. The girl had had enough of her potatoes, and right after that, that woman came up to her. She came to report that over the past few days, many have noticed that her strength and magical abilities have improved markedly. In her opinion, Bella should go to the capital to become an official colony in the palace. At which point, absolutely everyone who overheard this conversation started running away from her. People will be talked out of it. It's like they're forcing her out of here on purpose. And of course, as soon as Dino hears someone's voice or notices other people's eyes on him, his mood changes immediately. The fact is that in her past life, Sir Bellerophon appeared just before her 13th birthday, so if she stays here, he might find her again. Accordingly, she really had better leave, as all these people advise her to do. Although that's not the reason they're offering this option at all. But it's still a very good idea, but there's a problem. It takes a lot of money, which she doesn't have at the moment, and she either has to earn it or come up with a plan to avoid meeting Sir Bellerophon in any way. The kingdom of Ilium. Bella has dreamed of going there since she was a child, and it seems that the moment has come when she will have to realize this trip, and coincidentally, the dream of her childhood. Only now the girl realized that this second chance to live, this is a real miracle. She is sincerely grateful and intends to do everything possible, just so as not to disappoint Dino. This time she wants to be happy and make sure no one else can hurt her. She finally made that decision and decided that there was no other way. Bella had to fulfill her mission anyway, so just a few hours later she found transportation and hit the road. The girl thought it would take a lot longer, but as it turned out, the problem was just transportation, which she was able to solve very quickly. We can only hope she continues to do what she sets out to do so quickly and easily. A while back, when she was saying goodbye to those women, on the way, she decided it would be best to stay in a neighborhood on the outskirts of town. It would be safe, and there was little chance of her meeting anyone she knew. In all this time, the girl had never been so far away, except for 1 year in the palace. But now a new life had begun, and she would have to. There's nothing to be done about it, though perhaps she'll thank her fate for it, because there's no telling what's in store for her, and whether it'll be as bad as it seems. I had to find some work to start with, but since there are some problems with that, it can take at least a few days to get there. Bella started walking into every establishment she could find and asking if they needed any more employees. After 10 failed attempts, she decided to postpone the matter until tomorrow. For now, it was better to find a place to sleep for the next few days. Bella found an inn and asked if they had a room available. The man promised he'd try to find something, and right after that, started asking something about her hair. Bella didn't understand anything and decided to ask what he meant by that. And in a moment, she realized everything. The girl looked at him with surprised eyes. From not understanding how to explain it, really? This man was confused by Dino's. That second, she looked around for the nearest room and hid herself. It happened with incredible speed. And yet what had just happened, and why had the girl, looking at her hair, started hiding so abruptly? She closed the door with all her might, turned the lock and sat down on the floor. She needs to calm down. But for some reason, she still keeps holding onto her hair. It turns out it's Bella's birthday today, because of the move. She completely forgot about this day, even though she used to. Very much looked forward to this day a week in advance. In her past life, the rumor that Biala had changed her hair color led them to find her. The girl is afraid that one person has already seen it. The important thing is that next time she pays close attention and that I look at my hair. It turns out that she herself does not know how and why it happens, and at that moment, the man was surprised that right before his eyes, her hair began to gradually dye red. Bella is sure it's some kind of spell, and it seems like it would be very difficult for her to appear in public, much less control her hair color. She'll have to hide and run away from people a lot without anyone noticing, which makes her new life more difficult. At that moment, she remembers Lily saying something like that. But that's not all. The interesting thing about that the spell works not only on hair, but also on eye color. She said it would also very soon change. Luckily, the girl has memorized one very important phrase to make things right. She needs to head south before her next birthday. So she has exactly 1 year to save up enough money to go south, and if she fails, she'll have to live with the curse forever. A few more days have passed since then. Bella has been trying day and night to find some information or something to help her make sense of it all. She's been through all the documents and journals, but she hasn't found anything. It seems that just a few more days, and she will finally lose the strength and desire to do something. Because as you know, when nothing works, it is very difficult to continue. Probabilities that she had succeeded in finding some imperial certificate, which is given to people who are known to have passed in rigorous evaluation process. Turns out it's a wizard's license that officially authorizes access to anything. The thing is that since she is forbidden to reveal her identity and say who she is, she will never be able to get this certificate. For that, you have to tell a lot of things. At that moment, the guy came up to her and asked her why she wasn't in the mood. Because from the first second he saw her, she hadn't even smiled once. To cheer her up at least a little, he changed the subject and asked if the girl had any hobbies. She didn't really care about that at the moment, but suddenly he started talking about some game where, if you win 3 times, you get hired, and this is interesting. But as it turned out, this game is not quite normal. The girl found out the details and decided that it would be better to look for a job some other way. A few more days passed, and it seems someone changed their mind. Bella went to the place after all. It was getting hard for her to sit in her room and think about the fact that she was missing a good opportunity. The essence of this event is that if a spectator guesses which horse will run the fastest and take first place, the person receives either a gift or a job of their choice. At some point, there was wondering if she could guess which horse would get there first. She began to assess their looks, height, looks, and more. Anyway, at least here, it won't be as boring as at home, in complete silence and alone. It turns out that at this big event, there's a very important person who likes to watch these things and guess the winner. At this point, he turns to his assistant, and as usual, he was curious about his opinion. He started talking to him, but at the same time, not listening to his answers at all. He just wants to talk to someone, and it doesn't matter who it is. Interesting fact. More often than not, the guy asks the helper's guess, and usually, the helper very often guesses. And the guy, over the years, has never once been able to guess even a top 3 winner. No matter how hard he tries, he still can't get it right. He even justifies it with some kind of curse that doesn't exist and never did. Someone just doesn't want to admit that they have bad intuition that shouldn't even be counted on. Every time he comes to this game, he likes to promise that this time he will definitely guess and be the winner. But he is not interested in money. He just wants to guess at least once. It's amazing how he hasn't thought of singling out one horse first and then doing the opposite so that the odds of winning are multiplied. But unfortunately, it's like he's got some kind of really serious curse. His assistant had long ago made sure that at the end of the game, he'd better not be with the Lord, because he gets very upset when something doesn't work out, especially over the years. Meanwhile, Bella got tired of watching this game, and just minutes after it started, she decided to go home. But at some point, Dino felt something suspicious. He only turned around as he saw some man. The girl asked what he was looking at, and the second he did, this stranger ran up to her. He orders her to stop and grabs her arm really hard. Bella doesn't understand what he's doing. After all, she hasn't done anything wrong. Besides, it's the first time she's seen him. The man replied that he had been watching her all this time and wanted to find out how she did it. But the girl didn't understand what he was talking about. She asked what it meant and what exactly surprised him. She didn't hear a single word from him in response. The man had behaved too inadequately. Bella only realized one thing. There was no getting away from him. He wasn't going to let go of her hand and walk away until he heard the answer to his question. As soon as she started screaming and calling for help, some guy came right up to them, as if he had been waiting for this request all along. He went over and tried to punch the man with all his might. Luckily, the guy showed up really on time, because there's no telling what might have happened if it hadn't been for him. In fact, it would have been better if no one had come near at all. The girl's under enough stress, and she's being approached by strangers. At one point, someone draws her hand and offers her help. Bella has experienced so many emotions in the last few minutes that she doesn't even know how to react to it. If it's that gentleman's assistant who can't guess the outcome of the game, after that, this man addresses her by name. Although before that, she had never seen him in her life. The man explained that he had just looked at a paper with the names of people who had entered the area. It turns out that the man who grabbed her hand and this one came up for the same reason, because Bella guessed the horse that won the game, and she did it 6 times in a row, so everyone is very curious as to how she did it. At this point, the girl thought that he had probably come to offer her a job, though in fact he hadn't. She started asking a lot of questions, and said it had to be by the book because she knew what her reward was. Because the girl really needs it, he can't walk away and not give her what's due. In response, the man tried to explain that these are old rules and now they don't hire people this way, because they need people who are proven and have at least some minimal experience. Bella continued to insist, and in that case, the assistant suggested that she speak to the gentleman personally and explain what she required of him. The girl didn't think long and decided that this might be her last and only chance to get a job, and if she refused now, she would regret it later on. Just a few minutes later, she approached his office and decided that, as a result of the conversation, she should have a job by any means possible. Bella knocked on the door and asked if he could come in. The girl said it was very important and she would be very grateful if he could find some free time for her. It felt as if the gentleman had been waiting for her all along. He smiled at once and said he would gladly listen to anything she had to say, when suddenly the guy called her a sorceress who supposedly cheated him during the game. But he's not upset at all and for some reason keeps smiling. The guy walks up to her and asks if she wants to tell him anything, but does he really know more about her than he should? At least he looks too confident in his words. It turns out he owns a business, the essence of which is to arrange games as well, in competitions between spectators, as today's. At this moment, she has a feeling as if she has seen or known this man before. Although she realizes that this is the first time she has been in this office, and this cannot be the case. The girl tried to sneak a peek and look at him when he couldn't see it. After that, Bella began to follow his graceful movements and demeanor like a true aristocrat's. She really liked the gray-blue eyes of the color of the winter sky, which means that she is attracted not only to the benefits of the conversation, but also to his appearance. At some point, the girl noticed that he was also looking at her and no longer asking what he could do to help her. So she decided to start the conversation herself and asked if she had seen him before, because it felt like it had happened more than once. In response, he smiled and said it was a very interesting question. It was like he knew the girl was his right now, as suddenly, the guy called her a fraud again and thought that her question was just a distracting manager, which really surprised and even upset the girl because in fact, it is not so. Bella got embarrassed and explained that he just misunderstood her. They clearly had a misunderstanding. The lady doesn't want to look like what he just called her in his eyes. After that, she didn't even listen to what he said, because first of all, you have to change his mind and prove that he is very wrong. And the worst part is that she never told him the reason why she came to him, so I ended up having to spend time explaining it to her. Bella said she was interested in the job, and also she had no idea how she could possibly fool him, especially in which the girl looks into his calm eyes and realizes that she still can't change his mind. Does he really need any proof of that? It seems she has one last chance to get out. He'll just kick her out of this office and won't talk to her. In contrast to how happy he was to meet her, he's clearly not in the mood right now. The guy's always looking for a catch. Eventually, a miracle happened. He said to see what she could do and how she was different from the others who also deserved to get a job. He started hinting at some kind of test that would draw some conclusions, see if she was worthy of the job. The guy said to go to some place with one of his men. There she should be given the first task. And of course, Bella did not refuse and promised that she would cope with everything. She has absolutely no qualms about it, since the master let her take the test. It's much better than an immediate rejection or something like that. On the one hand, she is very scared, But on the other hand, she has no other choice. She has to earn money any way she can, even if it's impossible. Because from this day forward, nothing is impossible for her. The guy wished her luck and hinted that he would be very picky about her results, so she would have to try really hard to do well. Bella wished him a good day and set off to complete the task. She thanked him for the opportunity and gently closed the door. And as soon as they were alone, the assistant went up to the gentleman and asked him if he was really going to hire that stranger, in her opinion, and I need such a person, for everyone was doing well enough. But in reply, the gentleman said that she was right, and in general, he was not going to hire Bella. The second assistant was really wondering what was the point of agreeing and offering a meaningless test first, if in the end the girl would be out of a job anyway. The girl asked indeed what he was doing it for in this way he was wasting the time not only of his own, but also of his other assistants who had more important things to do. Besides, what does it have to do with him calling her a sorceress when it's the first time they've seen each other? The guy was obviously thinking about something. Is this his way to test her abilities and the assignment involves something that can't be done without magic? The gentleman explained that from the very first moment, as soon as she entered his office, everything became clear to him, because her gait, impeccable posture, everything said that she knows the etiquette and how to behave in the society of aristocrats, in his opinion. Although the girl is dressed in ordinary clothes, but her behavior gives away her real personality. It was surprising that he paid attention to such inconspicuous moments, but he wasn't at all surprised by the fact that she had a small dragon on her shoulder at all times, which already spoke volumes about what he was guessing about. Because it's impossible to ignore the fact that the two of them had the feeling that they knew each other at the same time. It can't be a coincidence. And that wasn't all. During the whole conversation, he felt as if with every word she said he was getting a headache, and that only happens on special occasions. In general, the guy is not going to stop because I'm sure if he tries, he can find out something interesting about her. Something that she, for some reason, hides. Meanwhile, Bella is already on site, greeted by a very handsome and smiling guy who would love to give her this test. He promised that the girl cannot worry, because next to her is a professional. He knows how to deal with horses. And in this business, the guy has already more than half of his life. It was strange that no one had ever explained to her what the trial was about, so she decided to find out now. In response, the guy smiled sweetly, but at the same time began to recount for some demon destruction. At this point, there was a lot of doubt as to whether it was even worth trying to get the job when it came to demons, and especially the destruction of the bow. What's next for her is known only to this guy and his master. They'll keep it a secret and not tell her anything until she sees it with her own eyes. She was scared, but at the same time, insanely curious to know what that mysterious and equally handsome gentleman had in store for her. At last, the most interesting moment has come. The assistant has given her some letter, and it seems there must be something very interesting in it. Bella happily opens that envelope and realizes that she's about to either get very happy or very upset if she wants to go back home. It turns out it's a lot easier than she expected. The letter says only one task: clean the stables in 3 hours. If it takes longer than that or the building is dirty, the task won't count. But that's not all. The biggest problem and difficulty is that she needs to do all of this without any tools or cleaners. At first glance, it seems to be some kind of a joke. The gentleman gave a very strange task. For some reason, complicated it. And in general, it is not clear whether his assistants cannot cope with it during working hours. There was one guess. Perhaps one of his staff would be watching her actions closely, and since he suspected she had magical abilities, perhaps that was what he was interested in. After all, it was impossible to clean a huge building without tools, much less bring water without a bucket that was still completely frozen. And of course, without thinking long, the girl starts to use magic, not even thinking that at this moment someone may be watching her. Bella started pointing the solar at this water so that it would thaw and become liquid. Otherwise, she just wouldn't be able to do the cleanup. Though really, she just doesn't have any other choice, even if someone is actually following her. Otherwise, the lady can't even manage to use the water. At some point, she came up with a very interesting way. Bella started looking for small stones and arranging them in the form of a pathway. She's got a good one. I just need to find out what it's for. At that moment, An assistant came up to her, wondering when she would finally start cleaning the stables. Apparently, he didn't realize that the cleaning had already started. More specifically, cleaning not what was inside, but this entire huge building. Bella smiled, looked at him, and said that if he wanted to live, he needed to run away now. She managed to start a small fire so that eventually, nothing would be left of that stable, except that she wasn't afraid of that guy finding out about it, because that way she doesn't get not only the job but also a chance to stay alive. Though maybe it's just part of the plan, and it's not as bad as it looks from the outside. At some point, that fire turned into a huge amount of water that began to creep through In just a few seconds, the water washed away all the dirt. The helper was scared at first, but then he realized, it's just perfect. This building wasn't this clean even on the first day of opening. Now it's all sparkling, as if cleaned up for some exhibition or event. The boy's spirits rose very quickly, as if he were the one who had asked her in one of the buildings of his palace to. It was only now that Bella wondered if he should have shown off his magic. Cleaning was fine, but how the guy would react to it was something only he knew how to do, and whether he would pay any attention to order at all, while he was convinced of his assumptions. Meanwhile, they started talking about this stable. The assistant said that, normally, it's very unpleasant to come in here, but now, it's going to be his favorite spot. But for some reason, he looks at her like he wants to say something, but for some reason he can't. Like he's afraid or embarrassed. When suddenly, literally in the same second, this guy's smile changed a lot. He said that if she wanted to live, she should run away. I guess that's the main part of the ordeal, which he didn't tell me anything about, so it turns out that he was a nice guy on the surface. But in reality, he turned out to be a liar who couldn't be trusted. The girl was attacked by scary beasts, and for a moment, all that sound reminded her of the very moment she remembered, as suddenly, Bella stumbles and falls to the ground. Even the dino couldn't help himself and flew off some distance. And that's too bad. The longer she lies here, the faster those creatures will catch up with her. Dino looked at her and acted as if he didn't care at all, as if he didn't realize that Bella's life was in great danger right now. He doesn't even try to come over to help or do anything. Although he used to help a lot when she didn't even ask him to do so. She doesn't understand what's going on. It's as if he's changed before her eyes. The girl doesn't recognize her little helper, and because of that, she's even more scared. In the end, he didn't say a single word to her and started to save himself. Bella didn't understand what that meant, and started to get very indignant, because she didn't expect him to do such a terrible thing to her in this situation. Dino calmly leaves, as if nothing happened. He really as if replaced. The girl was sure that his mission is to help her in any situation, but it seems that she was very much mistaken. No matter how much she screams and asks him for help, the dino ignores it and doesn't even turn around. And at that moment, the evil monster was already too close. Bella looked at it and realized it was the end. It looked like it would destroy her in seconds. But at that moment, she happened to see a familiar silhouette and began to hope that she could survive after all. It was him, the cute guy who sent her on this mission. Except what was the point of helping him if he wanted to get rid of her, or at the very least, hurt her? Lord took her hand and told her to hide behind his back. Bella didn't resist, and decided that it was better to leave all the fighting for later. Now it was important to survive. After that, the guy asked her to arrange and hide in his office. He gave that he would come back very soon and explain everything. Because of how scary and interesting it was, she suddenly wanted to stay. She even thought that maybe it wasn't part of his plan and he really didn't know it would work out like this. Either way, it still needed to be sorted out. And that wasn't all. As soon as the girl tried to raise her head and saw another monster in front of her, she didn't even have time to react before someone else approached her. It's some guy with blonde hair who immediately started reminding her of someone, like I usually do. He motioned her to rise and asked her why she looked so frightened. For there was no more danger. Bella turned away for some reason and wouldn't even look at him. It was like she felt she shouldn't talk to him, much less give him her hand. She just said it was okay, and at that moment, the gentleman came up to them. At that moment, she felt much more relieved and calm. The guy asked what was going on here, and after that, put his back to the girl. He came to protect her and made sure that suspicious and unlikely people didn't collapse with her. He made it clear to this guy that he shouldn't even try to talk to her, or he'd regret it. I wonder why he's doing this. Because the girl didn't ask him to do it. It can only mean one thing. Either he likes her and he doesn't want to see other guys with her, or this guy is his enemy, and he wouldn't like to see him anyway. He gave her one last look that said the next time he tried to approach Bella, it would be the last day of his life. At this point, the guy was in a really bad mood, so much so that he decided to get rid of one of his assistants. He just wanted to have fun, so he had one of them get rid of the one who helped the girl get to this place. At some point, he felt like doing it himself. He went over and without hesitation pushed him into the abyss with these monsters who were eagerly awaiting their prey. The next day has arrived, which means this is the moment she's been waiting for. Everyone is well rested and ready to talk. So that Bella would not be afraid of the master, one of his assistants came to her, for that should make it much easier for her. After all she had seen, it would be very strange if she were at ease in his presence. She's asked if she did well on the assignment, when in fact they're probably interested in something else entirely. Bella tries to smile and pretend that everything is fine. Though in reality, since yesterday, she's been thinking constantly about the dino who dumped her and left her with those monsters. She's no longer as interested in talking about work as she is in finding out what happened to him and why he stopped helping so suddenly. Seeing the sadness on her face, the gentleman did not stand and decided to make her happy. He said that the girl got a job, and from this day on, she would have her own office. He offered to go there right away so there was no time to waste and she had time to put her things there. But this was not the pleasant news that awaited her that day. Bella had just rejoiced at one event, as she was immediately met with a surprise. She sees the dino waiting for her right on the table. He looks at her like he changed his mind and wants to apologize. But instead of rejoicing, she grabbed him in her hand and started to look as if she was about to tell him everything she thought at the very moment she was left without his help. The girl is outraged, though really things should have happened a little differently. She doesn't even have the words to explain how much she hates him right now. The little dragon understands everything perfectly well, but I wonder where he was going then, and most importantly, for what purpose. Turns out it's very simple. He's just tired of doing nothing and doing things that have nothing to do with getting back at the people who got her here. They go places all the time, and there hasn't been a single conversation that's been about revenge. His only function was to help with that. And since Bella wanted a job and wasn't even paying attention to him, he just couldn't take it anymore and decided to leave. After hearing this, the girl did not hesitate and squeezed him even harder. Doesn't he realize that the work is only to get back at those people? At this moment, the gentleman came back to her. He asked why she was still standing in the same place, for he had given her this time to get used to it and to look at the office. In that case, he decided to just sit at the table and hang around. Besides, he's very curious to know what that little beast she's always talking to is. At some point, he gave her a new sheet of paper that clearly said something interesting. The girl read it, but still didn't understand anything. Turns out cleaning the stables was just punishment for her guessing the game and him not. He'd wanted to do it from the beginning, but since the girl was willing to do anything for the job, the punishment was easier than he'd thought. But that's not the most interesting thing, since she has nothing to hide anymore. Bella that she has to go to the Southern Kingdom at the beginning of next year, so she urgently needs money, or rather, a job to get it. Now he could see why she was so diligent in cleaning up and willing to do anything he asked. In the end, they agree that Bella's hired, and the guy's willing to pay any money to keep her from hiding anything from him. It remains only to find out what kind of work he can offer and what to do for it, although perhaps it does not even matter, because with the help of magic, the girl in a day can do what would take a month to do. Bella signed the contract and promised that she would try not to disappoint him. Besides, she didn't even have such intentions initially. She wanted to earn the money honestly. Even after this treaty, he still had doubts that he knew too little about her. Bella had just told him today what she needed the job for so badly. In his opinion, it probably wasn't the only thing he would have to learn about her. The gentleman was much kinder, for at first Bella doubted he would speak to her at all. And in the end, she got a job. She was promised a lot of money, and most importantly, all of this will help her fulfill her most important mission, to get revenge on those who wronged her in her past life. Right after that, 2 assistants knocked on their door, because they were also interested in what was going on here. They pretended they just wanted to help, but in fact, They were eavesdropping on their conversation the whole time. But as everything is very hard of hearing behind the door, they had to do it. The gentleman probably guessed it at once, but for some reason made it look as if he hadn't noticed anything. Luckily, everyone turned out happy. Of course, cleaned up boy what a girl wants a job for, and she got a job. After that, the guy offered to walk around the palace and at the same time to give a small tour, so that next time, the girl will be better oriented and not get lost. She's still impressed by the scale of this building because she had a very different view of it before. Plus, she really likes that she's treated very well here, even by the helpers who don't owe her anything. This huge duke's house is so huge that you can fit almost all the aristocrats in it. There are two prominent families in the empire, commonly referred to as the Two Swords. The first, Sir Bellerophon's family, and the second, the Atreus family. The Duke knows these two families very well. They have a good relationship, and there has never been a conflict. At some point, the assistant noticed that she wasn't really interested in talking about it, so she decided to change the subject right away. Evening came. Bella went back to her room and decided to think about what had happened during the day. Of course, there is like happy news, work and finding a dinosaur. But still, even that doesn't make her smile. In fact, she's sad for nothing, because to date, everything is going according to plan. She was not kicked out by the master, gave her a job, a private room, and an office, although it could be much worse. The girl stopped appreciating what she has now, probably because she wanted much more or thought things would be much easier. Anyway, all she had to do was wait a year, get the money, and go to the Southern Kingdom. It's going to be the hardest there. It's going to start with a hard road, sleepless nights, and constant stress, and thinking that it's not going to work out. The main thing is that the guy did not cheat, and during this time, did not change his mind to pay for her work. If that happens, you can consider that all efforts in vain. Before she went to sleep, she happened to remember this situation when he, because of his bad mood, easily got rid of his assistant. It means that he has some problems that are related to controlling emotions. He probably had some situation that turned him into a nervous person who doesn't feel sorry for anyone and can break up with someone so easily. At some point, she suddenly felt the urge to go down into the basement. She took a small flashlight with her to make it easier to navigate. And just a few minutes later, she heard a very familiar voice that became impossible to ignore. Bella saw in front of her a guy who couldn't be mistaken for anyone else. Because of the total darkness, she could barely see her legs as well. The girl saw that they had a lot of scratches on them. She asked who he was to make sure she got it right and was definitely not mistaken. She was so interested in talking that she didn't even bother to go any further. After all, it's not every day you do who gets locked up in a place like this. With each passing minute, she begins to realize more and more who he is and why he's here. But at the same time, Belle is nowhere to be seen in this, for he's constantly silent. And what's most surprising is that he doesn't even try to ask her for help. Is he used to it and doesn't want to get free? She wants so badly to hear his voice, but at the same time, he will purposely ignore her presence. Bella felt very sorry for him. The girl imagined how long he could stay here and realized why he didn't want to talk to her. Because after something like that, it was no surprise. Not only is he in this place and doesn't know if he'll ever be free, but he has a lot of wounds on him that apparently haven't even had time to heal. So he's suffering a lot and can't do anything about it. If he could defend himself or make a run for it, he would have done it long ago, the girl asked. Really? He doesn't even get caught again getting out of this horrible, dark, and unpleasant place. And in response, the guy smiled and still, not saying a single word. It was as if he didn't need anything else. Most likely, after such terrible torment, he no longer knows what to live up to and how to enjoy life, forgetting everything that came before it. As a friend, he approached her and told her that if she didn't want to be in this place, she'd better get out of here immediately. In return, Bella promised that she would never leave him. There was no way she was leaving here. At least not alone. It's really quite simple. If it was a stranger, she would have listened long ago and not taken the risk. The thing is, this is the same guy she loved in a previous life. It is unknown how, but she met him before she was even in the kingdom. All this time the girl thought that there she would meet him and she could get revenge. But it just so happened that as soon as she saw him again, she felt the same feelings as when she first fell in love with him. So, she didn't leave and decided that not only would she not retaliate against him, but she would try to help him get out of that place.